if you have just joined us and haven't been in the waiting room for too long, my name is Richard. I'm from a studio called Studio Bolland. I'm part of some of the administration or moderation on this motion design essay Discord server, and our goal is to build the motion design community in South Africa. And that ranges from illustrators and animators and sound designers and everything in between. So yeah, thanks a lot for everyone for joining us today. Cam has uploaded the files to the general 2D animation channel, which is just below the illustrators channel in this Discord server. So
I linked it on the chat as well.
Yeah, you can see it on there. So okay, Cam, over to you. I'm going to shut off my terrible face, and we can focus on what you got to show us. Cool.
Great. How's it, everybody? Thanks for coming. I'm Cameron, as Richard has mentioned, and yeah, we're going to be dabbling in a bit of character animation and After Effects today. So I think where this started, I think, is kind of with this character animation video I put out there on YouTube. So if anyone's watched that, you'll have an idea of what we're going to cover today, which is like a pose-to-pose animation technique, but in After Effects. And yeah, I think it's a very unknown technique for a lot of After Effects motion designers, and it's just a really useful one. And if you've ever seen the book, The Animator Survival Kit by Richard William, you might have come across this technique before. It's actually a frame-by-frame technique. And we're going to talk about applying it in After Effects with a rig. Because I think when I started character animation in After Effects, I knew about this book, but there was kind of this disconnect between, I suppose, the techniques they were talking about in that book and how to bring that into After Effects. It just didn't make sense. And I think for a lot of people, character animation in After Effects is just kind of dropping down keyframes and just like grinding until it kind of looks acceptable. And this is a very structured way to character animate. It's just much better. So yeah, intro aside, let me stop waffling. Let's get into it. Can everyone see the screen, by the way?
Yeah,
all good?
I think so. I think
great.
It's good on my side, which hopefully means it's good on everyone else's side. Yeah.
Sweet. If it isn't, people, you can just pop in the chat. We'll problem solve.
Cool.
Sweet.
We're all good to go.
Okay. So this is the rig we're going to be working with. This is Rob. Not short for Robert, short for robot. Because I guess he's a robot samurai dude. But before I jump into this, I basically want to talk about how to prepare for a character animation. And that's basically, the way I like to do it is finding references, because you should always use references, especially for character animation. So I'm going to walk us through that. So since he's kind of a samurai guy with a sword, I thought let's do like a kind of jumping slash. And I had something very specific in mind, and I couldn't find a reference for that online. So I just made one. And this is the animation. I mean, this is the video I took. Let me just actually.
It's an amazing video. I just want to put that out
there. Yeah, me trying to be a samurai with my stick as a sword. So yeah, that's where I started. And what I usually do from here is I actually bring that into Photoshop. And I draw the pose on top of that, so I can already get an idea of the key poses for this. Because the way that the pose-to-pose method works is that you identify these extremes, the most important keyframes, which, if you're working frame by frame, you then fill in the in-betweens after that. But these are your starting points. So basically, we have the kind of the first pose with nothing happening. Then we have the anticipation pose, which is this extreme. And a good rule of thumb when you're working when you're trying to establish your key poses is anytime the character's about to leave the ground or hit the ground, that's generally going to be a key pose. So here's the foot about to leave the ground as the next key pose. Then this is the highest point in the animation, key pose, and when the foot hits the ground again, and of course the very important slash. Cool, and then back to the settle, I suppose. We can call this a settle animation. Whoopsie. And then what I usually do from here is I just time it a bit better. I also didn't look at my rig before filming this video, so I needed to flip the character around as well. So this is it flipped around and just 3 times. I'm just going to play that for you so you get a sense of it. So that you can really see this kind of feels like an animation, and I think that's the power of these key poses. And what I did, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to ask for
Rich?
those who don't really know how to get a timeline up in Photoshop. You want to quickly explain just for 10 seconds, kind of how the timeline works in Photoshop?
How it works, or how to get something in there?
Or where do you access the timeline and
Okay, cool.
And how do you import a video into Photoshop? Because I think that might be fairly new for some peeps.
Fair enough. I'm glad you brought it up. Okay, so you can access your timeline from this window here. Just click on timeline. So that'll hide and show it. But if you actually want to import something, you're going to go File, Open, and let's see, where are we with this? So I'll just showcase it for you guys. So I'll just bring this in again. So if you go File Open, it basically will import your video into a timeline immediately. So that's only if you're using a video. Otherwise, I think you can actually create a video layer. You know, my frames to layers.
But yeah,
okay, so
that is already helpful for us.
Hopefully that's enough.
Yeah, I think that's
enough. I'm not even a Photoshop pro myself. Like, I've picked up a few things.
I feel bad for putting you on the spot there. So
no worries.
But yeah, that is helpful. Thanks for sharing.
Cool. And essentially, like, when you create a new layer in this thing, like if you just bring that above, you can see it's actually created a new layer afterwards, and then you can just trim these bad boys. So that's what I did back there. I just trimmed them to where I needed them to be. Okay, cool. So with the animation, what I essentially wanted to do here was give it quite a nice long anticipation, and I wanted to shorten the time between him leaving the ground and getting to the side point. And I wanted to give a bit more time when he's in the air. So it's kind of like whoop, and then a very fast slam down. So again, the time between hitting the ground and slashing with the sword is very short as well. But we'll refine this later. Okay, so once you've done that, you can actually, let me just close that, save myself some RAM. It's very important in After Effects to save as much RAM as possible. Okay, so what I did here is I actually brought the animation, the video with the frames on top into After Effects, so you can see it over here. And I've just put markers at these keyframes. I've also put in the start pose for us already and the end pose, just because I'm wary of time. This character animation is always time consuming, but I think these also aren't the most interesting frames. So yeah, we'll get to the interesting ones, which are the anticipation and when he's in the air. So if I come along in the timeline to this point, we can see our anticipation pose in the video. The way I like to start generally is I'll select all the initial keyframes and I'll just clone them. And
can I
think,
can I ask another quick question there?
Absolutely.
Do you want to quickly tell people a little bit about that tool that you're using to clone keyframes, just so that we know what we're looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is Motion Tools. If you've you might have come across Motion Design School, which they do courses and YouTube tutorials. This is kind of their free tool that you get if you sign up for their course. And it's very similar to something like Motion 2, which you might have come across. But it basically allows you to fiddle with your easing very quickly, change your anchor points. There are a few other things in here as well. And of course, the clone tool basically allows you to select more keyframes across multiple layers and copy them across, because the alternative is that you're coming to each layer and you're Control C, Control Ving them, which just takes too much time. And it's a great time saver. I think maybe I should also talk a bit about the rig. I've set this up so that it has IK on the arms, so left hand, right hand controllers. And I've basically dropped in keyframes for all the properties that I believe I'm going to use to animate this rig. So you want to minimize the amount of keyframes you have with character animation, because there are a lot already. If they're superfluous, just get rid of them. So then again, I have a controller for the feet. I've also added in some foot roll functionality in here, which is super rad. Not totally necessary, but nice to have. And then the cog is basically how I'm going to be controlling the hips and the torso of our character. Just undo that. Hopefully this thing doesn't take too long to render. And then of course I have a controller for the head. Allows us to rotate it, and it's also got the hair and the neck in there.
And so when people download your file, will this come with a fully rigged character that is pretty much what you see here?
Yeah, it will. You also have the final animation in there if you want to skip ahead. I don't recommend skipping ahead. Yeah.
bonus material. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thanks.
Sweet. So let's just get these keyframes in there. And I'm using hold keyframes because that's basically the way that we're able to use the pose method. So as I was saying, most people, when they're using After Effects, they're kind of just coming in, dropping in some keyframes, and they're just fiddling around with the settings. And I think it can get really out of hand when you do it that way. So you'll see this is kind of a very structured method, as opposed to just having at it. And on that note, another very important thing with character animation is the silhouette of your character. So you always want to create a strong silhouette. So if your character were just completely blacked out, there was a strong light behind them, you still want the pose to read very well. And if you're just fiddling with the keyframes, you're not going to get that strong pose, which is why I love this method. So let's actually start with this first pose. So this is the anticipation pose. And one thing, another thing to think about with character animation on top of your silhouette is your line of action. So can you see my mouse on the screen? I hope so.
Yeah, we can see your mouse.
Fantastic. That would be shocking if not.
I just want to also
Yeah.
quickly say, for those who've come on board the stream, feel free to ask any questions in the events chat. You can just type in, if you just hover over the events channel, there's a little open chat screen that comes up, and pop your questions in there. We'll ask them. We'll try to answer them as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll try to answer whatever comes through. So anything about any quick questions about what I'm doing, I can answer. Okay, so about the line of action. So what I'm seeing here when I look at this is kind of a strong C. So you have this line of action and you have this line of action. And I obviously thought about those when I was sketching this. So that's something that we're going to pay attention to. So for starters, I'm going to bring the cog back a little bit. So I'm just going to drop that a couple of clicks. I'm going to bring this right leg back a little bit, just a couple of clicks as well. And I'm going to add a foot roll, because I'm going to use that to kind of kick off of. And so let's see. You also want to create nice contrast between your poses. So I'm going to try to exaggerate things as much as possible, and you don't have to stick to your reference exactly. But let's get that going, and let's get the arms out to a nice position. I'm going to try and be as quick as possible because we have a lot to get through in the time. Okay, I'm going to also come into my torso, and I've used expressions to link the torso to a angle point controller on this null, so I can actually animate it right here. So I'm going to do about -20 on that. Okay, so we're getting a nice coil. Just going to change that. So I just changed I reversed the IK on this, so it's bending in the opposite direction. Okay. Don't worry if I get a little bit quiet while I'm fiddling around with these. It can be laborious. I'll try not to take too long. It's a lot of fiddling, character animation. See, what I'm trying to fix here is this overstretch. So I don't want to overstretch too much in this pose, and I want to maintain this nice curve over here. So I'm actually even going to come into the shoulder and lift that up a bit. So I've set this up so that I can adjust the shoulders, just so that I get a nicer curve there. And then I'm going to add some rotation to the hand so that it follows that same line of action. Okay. I want to see if I change this to -5, how are we doing? Okay, I like that. Okay, that obviously broke my arms, but that's the game. Okay, I'm going to slightly decrease the angle on this torso.
Maybe while you're fiddling around, I'll kind of maybe try explain why we as animators in After Effects kind of use null objects instead of, animating the hand itself, for instance. Like
I love that. I love that topic.
Yeah, it's a good.
Been thinking about it a lot lately.
Because it took me a while to kind of figure out, why do we animate on nulls? When I first opened up After Effects, it was kind of this huge program that I didn't know what was going on, and then people started talking about null objects, and I was like, "What the hell is a null object?" and nulls are like, as soon as you start using After Effects, a lot of the time, nulls are your biggest friend, and the reason they are your friend is because you can pretty much mess them around, like add different expressions onto them, move them up and down the layer order, and it's not going to change where your artwork sits. Because if you've got a foot that sits right at the bottom of your layer stack and you want to animate that foot, you have to like scroll all the way down to then change your foot, and that gets really irritating. And so as After Effects animators, we tend to create null objects and then parent that foot to that null object, and then all our animation happens on that null object, which makes it, as you can see in Cameron's demonstration here, all his null objects are just stacked one above the other, so that all the animation happens on like the first 8 layers or 7 layers. You can see he's hidden all the artwork underneath those.
If you want to have a look,
yeah, let's look under
at what's.
Let's pop the bonnet and look.
Yeah, absolutely. See what's happening under the hood here. So these are all the other layers that we're working with here. So you can see it's quite a lot that I've managed to hide, so that we just unclutter the timeline. And I should really lock a lot of these things as well, so I can't move them around accidentally. But there you have it, under the hood. This is where the magic's really happening.
Awesome. So hopefully that gives you, for those who are new to After Effects, gives you an idea of kind of why we animate on the nulls instead of on the layers themselves. And yeah, if you got any questions about null objects, do ask them. Cool. Back to you, Cam.
Sweet. So when I first animated this thing, I used a tiptoe on this foot, and when I finished animating it, I was like, that was when I started tweening, which we'll get to later. I was like, that wasn't the right move. So I'm just adding a foot roll instead, because I think that's actually going to be more appropriate for this lift off. So I set that to about -60. Always a good idea, once you've added in a new keyframe like this, to actually just go back and fill in the gaps, because when we get to tweening and they're not there, it just introduces the kind of chaos that you don't want. You're going to be trying to figure out why something's not looking right, and it'll be because you don't have a keyframe at that point. Cool. So I've just done that, and we're at this lift-off pose here. So, so with our reference, we have this line of action here, which this nice curve, and kind of from the feet all the way up to the head. And I want to accentuate that a little bit. So, I'll even bring back the torso quite a lot, add a lot of rotation to that. I think I might even add some more rotation to the cog itself. No, 5 is cool. And then I'm going to lift up the slab and add a bit of rotation to that. I've also set this up to have a nice little toe, like a toe thingy, like a seal's foot. And if you have these things, use them, because they definitely accentuate the action. Now, another thing that that I decided to do with this animation, which is kind of counter to the reference, is the positioning of this right hand. So the reference is already bringing up the sword, but I wanted to add a bit of overlapping action to that. And I thought it'd be interesting to have the sword actually drag behind a bit. And I think that also accentuates the line of action a bit more. So, we can even give this a little bit of overstretch. And let's just get our other hand into position. So talking about the silhouette, it can sometimes be a great idea to just, have the hand just peeking out here, just so you know, okay, cool, that hand hasn't completely disappeared. It's still there. Okay, I'm going to also tilt the head back a little bit of this and a little bit more, because that's also going to accentuate this nice curve that we're getting. So maybe even 15 on that and 10 on the head. No, that's too much. Okay, so another thing I want to show you is that if you're working with keyframes like that, if you hit J and K on your keyboard, you can quickly switch between these poses. So it's always a good idea to flip between your poses because, as I said earlier, you want to create good contrast between your poses. So you can see between the initial pose and the anticipation, we have some really nice contrast. Nothing looks weird, and there's a lot of movement between it. You want to always, when you want impact in animation, you want contrast between poses. And again, there's a really nice contrast between these two poses. Like, I think it's really cool that you get this sense of a coil or a spring, like this kind of C spring that actually. All right, let me get into the next pose. That actually rebounds into the opposite. So it's a C like this, which becomes like the opposite, like this. And that's really what I wanted to accentuate with this next pose. So always be thinking like that. And, I might even add a little bit more rotation to the torso just to really accentuate that as much as possible. Cool. Let's move on to the next pose. Once again, I'm gonna copy these. Over. However, I am going to take off the neck rotation as well as the torso rotation and the hip rotation. Okay, so I'm going to just select all of my controllers at once because now we're moving to that top pose. This is where he's at his highest, and it's helpful having that last keyframe in because we can actually see where that midpoint is. So I'm just going to jump between those two. Okay, so let's get this pose going. I think another helpful thing we can do is with our guides, you can see this is where the floor plane is. So when I jump to the next key pose, we can see it has actually lifted off. Not a heck of a lot, so we're going to exaggerate that. Okay, so once again, because our previous pose was like this kind of C, I'm going to crunch this up a little bit in the opposite direction. So I'm going to add a -5 to the torso. And I might just bring the head slightly forward as well as the neck. It's often a good idea to actually use whole numbers with these. Okay, so now we're going to bring the sword behind the head. So I'm just going to bring that up and behind. And that's definitely looking a bit high. So I'll probably bring him down a little bit in a second. When rotating hands, when you're character animating, you always need to think about the direction that hand is actually going to be moving. So if I thought, okay, I just need to get this hand to here, and I went this way, when I turn these into easy ease or whatever linear keyframes, that's going to look very wrong. So when you're lifting your arms, make sure you're rotating in the right direction. Okay, so I'm not going to actually take this too far back, because in the next pose, I'm going to actually let the sword go even further back. Now, another little thing I have going on under the hood is this little hand on the sword. So that, well, you can't really see that, but it kind of switches on at this point. So I've just dropped the opacity. I've taken the opacity from 0 to 100 so that it looks like he's holding his sword. So I'm just going to make sure that that actually lines up properly. And it's somewhere about there. I'm going to hide the fingers. You can cheat some stuff in After Effects. I could just turn off the hand and fingers completely, but I think this is fine. I'm going to grab both of those. Just mess around with that a bit. Now that they're in the right position. Just want a bit of bend. Okay. So once again, line of action, very important. This is the kind of curve that we're looking at. That goes from his foot all the way up to the sword overhead. Okay, and since we have it, let's have our toes. Just doing a little bit of extra. It'll create a kind of overlapping action with these toes, where they kind of feel like they're being dragged. So it's this kind of thing. Okay, great. I'm just going to bring the whole character down slightly.
I just want to say that this is probably the fastest character animation I've ever seen in my life. So great job at the speed. Even though it might feel like you're going slowly, this is super fast for animating characters.
Yeah, look, in all fairness, when I did this the first time, it took a lot longer because, it's character animation. At least I have some of the stuff that I can remember from what I did previously. A lot of things, it's a lot more problem solving than it looks like when you're doing it the second time.
Yeah, I mean,
okay, so
the scene could take someone like an entire day to animate, but you're trying to wrap it up in like an hour or so, which is pretty nuts. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm wary of that time. Actually, in fact, we're 8:09. So I want to actually get into the tweening part of it. So I think, Richard, if that's cool, I'm going to actually just skip ahead to that because I kind of pre-baked this. I kind of thought there's no way we're getting through all of the blocking of the keyframes in this session. And I want to give everybody like a sense of the whole process.
Absolutely, yeah. Please, I think we got a great idea of your kind of techniques so far. So
there we go.
Please do. Let's pull one out the oven and see.
Sweet. Yeah, just like any good infomercial, you have to pre-bake the turkey, and that's exactly what I've done. So this is what it takes to create your key poses. But if we now come into our pre-bake folder right here, we have the whole keyframes. Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to play it for you. And there you can see this feels like an animation already. And I think that right there just shows you the power of this technique. Like we're already getting something that feels like an animation. And After Effects is going to fill in a lot of those gaps for us. But the thing you want to do at this point, once you've blocked in your keyframes, you can actually get rid of your reference because it's at the point where you actually want to exaggerate the things that are important for this animation. So for me, I want a nice long anticipation. So he's really building up for an action. So I'm just going to select all of these keyframes plus these bonus ones, which I'll talk about just now. And I'm going to take it to exactly the 2-second mark. And if you're wondering how I did that, if you select a bunch of keyframes and hold Alt, or it's the same on Mac, Alt and left or right on your keyboard, you can actually move these keyframes. Super helpful. I'm going to run through this quite quickly because I know what I want this to be. So I want the timing from him going from the ground, the anticipation pose into the next pose to happen very quickly, because the whole movement's going to be quite fast. So about 3 keyframes ahead for that. Then I want to go, how many was that? About 6 keyframes until this pose. And then again, another 6 after that. And then when he hits the ground and he's going for that slash, I want that to be super fast. So I only put 2 keyframes in there. This is just a personal choice. I wanted it to slam really hard. Okay, cool. So I definitely went over time a little bit on the key poses, you know. The thing about animation is you actually really want to get into that flow state, because that's where things start to really speed up. And I think I was getting into that zone. Totally forgot about the time.
No, it's all good. I don't think we even discussed really how long the stream would be. So,
cool.
You know, we'll try see if we can start wrapping things up around 8:30. But if we go over, that's also totally fine. People,
Sweet.
I'm sure, will just drop out when they feel like they've had enough.
When they get saturated.
Yeah. We'll see you at 11 p.m. Still animated.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But feel free to just go at your own pace and skip where you want to. Don't let us compromise on the process.
Absolutely. Cool. Okay, so at this point, let's actually just preview this. You always want to be previewing to get a sense of your timing. So yeah, I already knew what I wanted this to be, but the first time I was doing it, I obviously spent a bit of time figuring out this timing and making sure it felt right to me. So the next step in this process is what's known as tweening. And this is where you're basically filling in the gaps between these key poses. It's akin to putting in your in-betweens if you were a frame-by-frame animator. But of course, After Effects does help us if we give it the right input. So what I'm going to do for starters is I'm going to grab all of these keyframes and I'm just going to convert them into continuous Bezier keyframes.
Do you want to just run us through how you did that?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So if you select your keyframes and just hold Alt and click, Control and click, you can toggle between different keyframe states. So there's your linear and there's your continuous Bezier. And if you want to get back to your hold, you hold Control and Alt and then click them. Okay. Cool. So let's just give that a preview. Obviously, this is going to look really bad. I mean, we see there's something starting to happen, but yeah, nothing good yet. And that's, of course, because we need to ease this. We need to give a sense of the timing of this animation. So I already know that I want a 60-60 easing on this because I messed around with it the first time. So this will be for the anticipation pose. I want him to have a kind of slow in and a slow out.
And when you say 60-60, like, do you want to explain about kind of influence in the speed graph for 30 seconds? Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so if I select these keyframes, which have the 60-60 easing, it basically it refers to, I suppose, the speed of an animation. So how much inertia you're giving it. So if I actually grab these and I pull on this handle, if you see influence, it might be a little bit small, but you can see it says it's moving from 60 to 70%. So that's like how much time the animation will take to, I guess, get to its zenith, basically. Yeah, so you can basically crank this with these graphs, and these graphs kind of give you a good idea. It's creating this exponential speed. And maybe, I mean, it's great to actually demo this, but I don't think we're going to have time for that. Perhaps if people are interested, we can actually do a session like this just on like the speed graph or something like that. Like I'd love to do a demo on like easing and the speed graph and the value graph, which is
Absolutely.
it's a whole topic on its own.
Yeah. Let's do it. We'll set it up.
Oh yeah, sweet. Okay, so we have our influence set to 60 on either side, so we have this nice ease. And then I'm going to leave these keyframes, or this keyframe and this keyframe as our continuous Bezier. With our slash, I'm going to have that come in pretty hard. So again, I think like for simplicity's sake, we can actually just add 6. Actually, I'm going to easy ease our slash, and I'm going to add a 60 ease in. Okay, so again, this motion tools is just a quick way to add that easing in as opposed to grabbing these coming into the graph. If I just add a normal easy ease, I could drag this. I could just, what are you giving me an error for? After Effects, interpolation method not allowed for this stream. Okay, don't know what that means. But this happens in After Effects, so it's good that we all see it. I'm just going to actually add the easing in with this. That's not even working. Give me a sec. Technical difficulties, eh? Okay, I see what's happening. Wouldn't be After Effects if we didn't have a little crash at some point. There we go.
There you go. Working again.
It would be, if we weren't paying so much for After Effects, those kind of bugs would be fine, but we are, so it's frustrating. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is add a 60 easing to this. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to do that just yet. So what I did with this actually is I left everything as a continuous Bezier, but then I came to the cog position, the hand position, the hand positions, and the foot positions, and I basically dropped some easing onto that. So if I make that 60, I can now lift these all up, just so that it continues just slightly. So it doesn't come to a complete standstill there. Cool. Rendering has started nice and slow. Just clear the cache. Okay, cool. So I think let's just move on with this process. Easing is something you can fiddle with for ages. What I want to talk about next is the arc of the motion. So right now, this obviously looks it looks really silly because we haven't fixed the arcs of our limbs and our body. So for starters, I'm going to come into our cog and I'm going to select the position keyframes. And I'm just going to grab these middle ones. And if I hold Control and Alt and just click on the points, it creates a curve on the whole thing. And we'll basically come in and just fiddle with these curves, make them nice and sleek. You want them to flow really well, pretty much, if you can. Sometimes it's not appropriate. I'm gonna actually make this linear. This linear. Okay. So what we're looking at now is the cog movement. So I'm watching his hips as they move down. And I do actually want to add just a smidge of an arc to this. So he's curving down just slightly. It's like down and back. So let's preview that. You see what I mean there. Okay, great. It's also sliding his foot back. And with the foot, I'm going to turn this keyframe just into a regular linear so that it slides back a bit quicker to take that weight. So when you're, another thing I actually forgot to mention when you're creating your key poses is the weight of your character. So you never want them to feel unbalanced, like they're going to fall over. So part of the reason this pose works, having him kind of set back like this, is that we have these arms helping center the gravity or the pull of gravity so that he doesn't feel unbalanced. Okay, so I think in the interest of time, I'm going to move on from the cog. Once again, these are things you can tweak a lot, but I think the arms are very important when it comes to your arcs. So let's grab our position. Again, I'm grabbing these middle ones, and I'm just going to click to add a curve to those bad boys. And I'm going to focus in on this hand right here. So I'm going to grab this keyframe, and I'm going to just pull that out. Essentially, we want a nice wide swing where he's not bending the arm too much. It doesn't feel like he's tucking it in too much. It's like a nice wide arc. Cool. Then I'm going to grab this keyframe, and once I'm going to pull that quite wide again, because when he pulls up like this, we also don't want that. Oopsie, wrong handle. We don't want that bending in too much. We want it moving in a nice arc. And does everyone understand what I mean when I'm talking about the arc? Like, does that make sense? The kind of like if you look at character animation books like the Animator Survival Kit, it's kind of said that every movement is kind of circular. It's not, you're never moving in a straight line. And so in order to create good character animation, you want to really think about these arcs. Okay, so he's overstretching a little bit there, so I'm just going to fix that, because we don't want too much of an overstretch. It can be good to have a bit of that, just to exaggerate an action, but we don't want it to be too crazy in this case. Okay, so that's looking good. I'm going to grab this handle up here and pull that out, because we're anticipating quite a big arc here, like a really strong swing out. So let's just see what that looks like. There we go. Kind of bending a bit too much there. So let's fix that. See how it looks on the way up. There we go. Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, so once again, I'm not going to tweak this too much, because you'll just be sitting with me here all night while I tweak these little handles, and it's just not going to be fun for anybody. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going through with this one arm. And I think I'll just do this one and then move on to a foot so we can get a sense of that. And then we'll kind of have gone through the most important arcs. And you can hopefully extrapolate that to the other limbs. I'll follow the same process with those hypothetically. Okay, so let's continue with that. Let's see. In order to press handles, you just need to hit Control and Alt again. So if I click Control Alt, it kind of makes it brings the handles back together. But if they are connected, you can use that to basically break them, so they're not forming a curve. Because at this point, we basically want it to go in the opposite direction, so we don't need an arc there necessarily. Okay, then I'm going to mess with this arc here. Actually, let's mess with this one. Okay, so this is going to come out really wide because this is our slash down. So I might even break that. Okay, so let's just see what that looks like. Yeah, that's way too much. Don't want too much overstretch on that either. And let's do something on this. Okay. Sweet. And then after that, we're going to come back into our settle pose. And you know what? I actually want to come a few frames forward and just do these keyframes so that he actually stays in that position just for a little bit. And this is going to basically cause some weird things in between there with that hand because of the arc. So a good way to fix that is to just grab your position, hold Control and Alt, and turn it into a hold keyframe with an ease in. It's like an ease in hold. So we maintain the easing on this end, but it gets rid of this jiggly thing that was happening there. Okay. Then I can come to this and just give that a nice arc as he comes into the settle. Okay, I'm going to leave that. If there are any questions there about creating that arc, now's your chance. Otherwise, I'm moving to the legs. Good.
Cool.
Okay.
All good to go on the legs.
Okay, so let's see, which is the most interesting leg here? Let's just have a look at those arcs. Okay, so I think the most interesting one is the one that's kind of popping off the ground here. So let's fiddle with that one. I'm going to once again add a curve to that. Just make sure that it's a good looking curve. And again, you'll see at the end here, the foot's moving away. And I can just fix that by hitting Control Alt and clicking on that keyframe. Pro tip for you guys there. Okay. Cool. So at this point, as it's basically coming off, you can see what I mentioned earlier. I used a toe roll on this. So you can see what a tiptoe on this. And that wouldn't have been my choice the second time around, but we're going to make it work. Okay, so just at this point where it's going to pull off, that's fine being straight. We basically want the foot to stay in the same position, which it is for the most part. I think maybe what I can do is just adjust this curve slightly so that It really sticks. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so this foot comes up and around, and you can see right there, that's where we get our overlapping action with this foot. Okay, and one thing I want to note at this point, I think we can leave the arcs alone for now. They're just a few kind of cleanup things I want to talk about. So one of those is that when your character's landing, which is this frame here, he's kind of just landed. You really don't want any of this stuff to be there. You want that to be completely gone at that point. So in the case of the left foot, like this, no one's landing like that. He's broken his foot at that point. So I'm just going to actually reset all of these to 0 so that he has a nice flat foot, and then he's going to go into this lift at this point. And then, of course, I want this next foot to slam down immediately, and that actually is perfect. Okay. Cool. So, I mean, let's give that a quick little preview. Obviously, we haven't fixed the arcs of everything, but that's going to have to be all right. You can see that the limbs that we have affected are working quite nicely. Okay. So, quick little thing that I set up over here. All these hold keyframes you haven't seen. I basically I path animated some stuff here. So I'm just going to add the same easing that I added to the above here to this. So it'll be a hold keyframe. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so basically what's happening with this is I've just animated the torso to basically tilt in 3D space a little bit. You'll see it best when he lifts up. And that's just a nice little bit of spice that you can add in after you finish an animation. Okay, now the next thing I want to talk about, because we can't get to the arcs, is basically just creating a bit of overlap between things. So right now, everything is kind of happening at the same time, and it can often be really nice to just add a bit of overlap to that. So at the anticipation pose, we could do something like just offset the torso just slightly. So if I offset the torso rotation, these are kind of subtle details that you might not even actually notice. But on the head, that might be more noticeable. So I can come in here with the head, grab the head and neck, and just pop these both, the neck one keyframe forward and the head one keyframe forward. So it just kind of lags behind. It looks funny when he hits here. So I'm going to take these back in. But this kind of step is basically just so that things aren't happening at exactly the same time, because humans don't really move perfectly in sync. There's a slight bit of offset. So what I can do with the head when it's coming back up is grab these and just increase the influence on this side, and here you'll really get a sense of that overlap. Can you see it in this? Maybe not. Just going to increase that.
We can't. It is coming through subtly, but yeah, I think we can see it on the stream.
Okay. Cool. So look, without getting into too much detail on all of this stuff, you can do the same thing with the legs. So when they hit at this point, it can be nice to, just offset these slightly. And you kind of have to play around with what looks good. But there you can see that subtle offset just adds a bit of, I guess a bit of flair and like a less mechanical feel, I suppose. Because rigs can definitely have the tendency to feel a bit mechanical. So anything you can do to get rid of that. Okay, and look, since we're running low on time, I guess I can answer any questions about this process if you have any. But essentially, I think I hope that you guys get the idea, like what this step entails, and you can kind of apply it. Because the whole point with this technique is that it's not something where you just kind of watch a tutorial and you learn how to do one very specific thing. It's more of a process that allows you to create your own character animation by applying these principles, applying these steps. So hopefully that's come through. What I can do at this point, I think, is just jump to the final.
Yeah, we would love to see a finished version.
This is why I have the pre-bake stuff in here, because honestly, a whole character animation demo from start to finish, I think it, even with the second time doing it, it's going to take a good couple hours.
I mean, the fact that we've got through so much in an hour is incredible. And we can see some smears coming through there on that one.
Yeah, look, I love a good smear, so I thought I had to just pop it in there. I'll show you guys how I did that in a sec. But yeah, this is the final product. This is what I ended up with. At this point, I think you could go into the hair and add a bit of secondary animation, just so that feels less rigid. You could maybe add some expressions to the character, all little details. And if anyone's interested in the smears, I really love me some smears. Couldn't resist with a sword being there. I mean, we got to add some freaking smears in. And these are just literally path animated, one frame in between, and they just disappear. So there's just one up and one down, and it's done. Great way to add like more movement to like a very quick action. So this slash is really only 2 frames. But that kind of adds a lot more movement to it. Love me some smears.
You're getting some massive props here in the chat, so that's awesome. Can you give us a little full screen preview of this animation by any chance?
I absolutely can. If anyone knows the shortcut for getting into full screen, I don't know what it is, but
it's the tilde key. If you hover over the
yes. The damn key that I pressed by mistake.
There you go.
All the time.
Harold's come in with the tilde as well. You know, the teacher's become the student.
Okay, yeah, it kind of just. This will probably be good enough.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So it's cut off a little bit. You could drop this pre-comp into something else and hit the continuously rasterize button, and the top of the sword would be in there. But yeah, or lower him in this comp.
Yeah, we know that continually rasterize button destroys a lot of animations. So
yeah, it does, but it shouldn't in this case.
It shouldn't. Yeah.
Oh, it might. It might. Who knows?
I don't think. Yeah, you've used any plugin with like the CC before it tends to get destroyed.
Yes.
But yeah, this is so cool. Yeah, such great work. An amazing process as well. The amount of kind of new information that I've learned being in After Effects. I've been using After Effects since 2006, as I said before, and there's some new stuff I've learned tonight. So thanks so much for sharing that with us.
Thanks for sticking with me. It's a very kind of laborious process, but as you can see, like the results is worth the suffering that it takes to get there.
I've unmuted, or at least given people the option to unmute themselves if they want to ask a question in person. I thought we'll open it up to everyone. So I think you
Sounds good.
should be able to click unmute and ask away if you want to. Otherwise, feel free to keep using the chat. Cameron, before people start dropping off the stream, I wanted to give you want to let people know, how do we find you? Where do we, to see more of your content, to see more of your tutorials? Where do we go?
Oh yes, thanks. You can't forget the shameless self promotion. So you can find me on Instagram, Cameron Shefer-Boswell. There is no other Cameron Shefer-Boswell in the world. So if you type that in to Instagram, you will find me. And then you can also find me on YouTube, where I've been creating some tutorials lately. I'd love to love to get some more eyes on that. It's a growing channel.
What is your channel name over there?
It's called XP. So if you just type in XP or type in, you'll find it on my Instagram. You'll definitely find me through Cameron Shefer-Boswell on Instagram. The link is in the bio. Otherwise, type in XP motion graphics or XP animation and see if that gets you there. I really need to check that SEO. That's my bad. I should be more prepared for promotion.
We've got a question here in the chat. Anwar's asked,
Ooh.
is there a way to store pose keyframes in After Effects for reusing on other Duke rigs?
That is a good question. And look, there is technically a way to do it using Duik. So, I mean, it gets complicated because every rig is different. So, like, you're copying in like a position keyframe that might break your other rig. So, it might push the limitations of that rig. So I think you have to be careful with it. Also, your naming has to be exactly the same. But if you go to this keyframe tab here, you can see you can actually copy keyframes. So what you can do is copy them from one comp to another. As for storing them, I mean, a good rule of thumb is to kind of just, once you've created your key poses, you just create a new comp and do your tweening in there. And then they're always there, and you can copy and paste them as you wish across comps using this method. But yeah, look, it's not foolproof. I don't know if Laval is still here, but he actually, if he is, he knows a bit about this.
He's
copying stuff across or copying keyframes with character animation. But really, ideally, you want all your layers to be named the same, and you want the rig to have very similar proportions, or else it's just going to mess it up. I hope that answers your question.
Then
okay.
Then we've got Ty Max saying, do you record yourself doing reference poses in your day-to-day job? Does time allow for it?
Yeah, not always. I only do it if there's a pose that I can't find online. Like my first, I first look for things online, and often you can find what you're looking for. But yeah, look, I think if you have the equipment, if you have just a phone camera, you can do these things really, really quickly, so that it's not going to cut into your work time too much. I mean, if I'm completely honest, I have gone into these things blind before, and just tried to figure out what the key poses would look like. But at the end of the day, that'll actually add more time to it, when you could have just gotten the reference and the whole process would have gone a lot quicker. So everyone does it. The whole animation industry is using references. So it's like, if a client doesn't want to pay the time for you to do that animation reference, then shame on them. Shame on them.
I mean, we often have interns in our studio who sometimes will animate without references, and you kind of have to slap them on the wrist a little bit and say, please use references. Like everyone in this industry uses references. Like you're not a worse animator if you're using a reference. Like in fact, most likely you're a better animator if you're using a reference.
Yeah. I think that's such a good point.
We have Larissa asking, do you prefer Duke for rigging, or do you use other rigging plugins as well, like Limber and Rubber Hose?
I love this question, and I'll tell you why. Because this is a perfect segue into another shameless plug. So I just created a tutorial that basically allows you to create very like limbs that are very similar to Rubber Hose and Limber, just using shape layers and this little nifty plugin called Create Nulls and Paths. All native After Effects stuff. Super useful technique. I use it for this character as well. So that's what allows him to kind of overstretch so easily. Look at that. So look, I generally, so to answer your question, I generally don't use those plugins. I just use that exact method, partly because I'm a cheapskate and partly because it's kind of unnecessary a lot of the time. But I have used them in the past and they are fantastic. They can be heavy as well though. So you pop 2 to 4 rubber hoses in your project and all of a sudden like previews are starting to take a really long time. So yeah, pros and cons.
Cool. I think that's the end of the questions, and unless anyone has anything more they would like to ask. And yeah, I just want to say once again a huge thank you, Cameron, for giving us that demo. I mean, this is years and years of experience that you are sharing for free with us, so we really do appreciate it. And yeah, please, if you guys haven't checked out Cameron's tutorials on YouTube and Instagram, they're awesome. It's really an amazing tool, and for it being South African as well is just incredible, because often the content that we consume in order to learn After Effects and stuff like that is all American or European, so it's amazing to have some homegrown animation resources out there. So big props to you.
Thanks. It's also why I love that this motion design Cape Town community is something you guys are doing, because I just think it's so great to be growing this community in South Africa, because there are a lot of us around, and we need to start talking more.
Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe if that is the end, we'll just call it there, and I'll end the stream. And yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers everyone. Thanks for coming.